Good morning, Grania. Thanks for coming in today for your first HPV vaccine. Your mother's sent me a consent form, which is great, so that we can go ahead. But she made a note on here that said you had a few questions about the vaccine that you wanted to ask first.
Yes, I do. How important is the vaccine and just how common is HPV?
HPV is a viral infection that is very common. Around 85% of all children will develop an infection, boys and girls, over the course of their lifetime. In most children, the infection will clear itself over a year or two and it'll go away. But it's a very sneaky virus, and in around 10 to 20% of children, the virus stays in your body. And over a period of time, it causes a number of diseases. The most important of those are the cancers. It can produce cancer of the genital tract, cancer of the head and neck, and cancer of the tubes of the lungs. And so this is a very nasty virus that has serious consequences. The other thing it can do is it can produce a disease called genital warts. So we know it's a very common disease and it has very serious consequences, and we're particularly keen to stop children getting it.
It sounds like a serious yet common condition, but how well does the vaccine actually work?
We're really pleased. We have a new, stronger vaccine now. This has 9 different strains of HPV in the vaccine, and it's 100% effective against those 9 strains, which means it's around 90% effective against all cancers that it causes in the body. And so we know it's not only 90% effective against the cancers, but it's 90% effective against the genital warts and the other diseases. So it's a great vaccine. It's very effective against a very common disease.
Is this a new vaccine?
No, a lot of people have been saying, I don't want my child to have it yet. I'll wait till they're older because it's a new vaccine and I want to wait and see if there's any problems with it. But we developed the vaccine in Australia, and that was over 20 years ago. And we've been using it in big programs for over a decade. There are more than 10 million Australians that have had this vaccine, and there are more than 300 million people across the world who've had the vaccine. So this is not a new vaccine. You don't need to wait and see what's happening with it. We know already. The other reason not to wait and to have it now is that we know the body's immune system works much better when you're young. When you're 12 or 13, you have a gland in your chest called the thymus, and that gland makes T cells. It makes the cells that fight the infections and the cancers in your body. And when you get older, because you've already developed a lot of antibodies, the thymus disappears. That's why when you're 12, we only have to give you 2 doses of vaccine, but if you wait till you're 15 or 16, you need to have 3 doses of vaccine. So it's really important to get it when you're young and your immune system is working, and you don't need to worry about being new because we've been using this for well over 10 years.
Are there any side effects?
There are side effects of all vaccines. We know that vaccines can give you a sore arm, and this is certainly a vaccine that stings when it goes in, and we know that can last for a few hours. We also know that it can give you some redness or swelling around the actual vaccine site, but there are no significant side effects. They're all side effects that cause local reactions that disappear usually within a day. And so we're comfortable that there's no major side effects of this vaccine.
A friend of mine said that it could interfere with my period and could also prevent me from having babies. Is that a real risk?
No, it's not a real risk. When this vaccine first came out, there was a lot of concerns by very strongly religious groups that this vaccine would encourage children to become sexually active because it protected against sexually transmitted diseases. And they've made a whole range of claims about how dangerous the vaccine is to try and actually stop parents and children getting vaccinated. The condition they're talking about when periods slow down and then stop when you're still young, what we call premature ovarian failure, happens to around 1 in 10,000 women. So it's not common, but it certainly happens. So if you think of the fact that we've vaccinated 10 million children, and this happens to 1 in 10,000 whether they have a vaccine or not. It's pretty easy to find, a group of 2 or 3 people who've had the vaccine and have the condition, just as it's easy to find a group of 2 or 3 children who didn't have the vaccine and still got the condition. So we know that you are no more likely to have problems with your fertility if you have the vaccine or you don't have the vaccine, and this is just something they've made up to try and scare people. There's a lot of other stories they say. They say that it's more likely to actually cause cervical cancer rather than preventing cervical cancer, and it's just not possible. This vaccine was made by mimicking a protein on the surface of the virus, and so the body makes antibodies to that protein, and then it attacks the virus when it sees the protein. But the vaccine's not live, it can't replicate in your body, it can't give you any disease, and it certainly can't give you cancer. So this is another one of their stories to try and frighten parents about the vaccine. And there's lots of these stories on the internet. They say it causes chronic fatigue syndrome, which it doesn't. And so we are disappointed that they feel this is a way of preventing children having the vaccine, and that in some way is going to decrease the number of children who are sexually active. But this is not the case, and we know that it's important protection against lots of cancers that people get.
He also said that it hasn't been studied properly. Is that true?
Well, it's not true, and I think because they've made up so many stories about it, we've had to do lots and lots of studies to check. Every time they come up with something new, there are more studies. The World Health Organization has a very special group of immunisation experts that look at side effects, and they meet every so often to look at these things. And they've now done 7 different studies on the HPV vaccine to look at all of the claims that have been made by these people. And what they've found is that there's no data that says this has any significant consequences. It's a very, very safe vaccine. And so they've studied it and studied it and studied it and still not found anything. So it's certainly not true that it hasn't been studied properly. Have you got any other questions this morning, Grania?
No, I don't. I don't want to worry about any cancers down there, so I'm happy to have the vaccination.
Okay, I'm going to get the nurse in and we'll get things organised to give it to you this morning.
Perfect.